Welcome to Life in Sirens, Behind and on the Scene, a podcast by first responders. We're your hosts, Sophie,
Jamie,
and Aubrey.
The content provided in this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policies or positions of any medical institutions, emergency medical services, or healthcare organizations. Patient privacy is a top priority, and all discussions involving real-world emergency situations are de-identified and altered to ensure confidentiality. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional or your local EMS protocols before making any decisions regarding patient care or medical practices. Listener discretion is advised, as some topics may include discussions of real-world emergency situations.
Alrighty, welcome to Life in Sirens, episode number 3, which is wild to think about. We're already on episode 3, week 3. On this episode, we will be discussing a very hot topic. I get this question frequently, and that is, does it ever get easier? And that is in regards to becoming a paramedic, becoming a new baby paramedic, evolving into an adult paramedic. Does it get easier? Life is not always the same, from baby fresh medic right out of school to grouchy old. I've been here for 35 years, but it gets different, I will say. So let's get into it. Ops is just out of school 1 year?
Yeah, it's 1 year in August.
This fall? Yeah.
Yep. I think that we have, sitting right here, a pretty unique view because I just got out of school. You've been out of school for 3 years now. And then, James, you've been a paramedic for 7 years now. So we have a pretty good...
What?
It was 6.
My bad. I can't count.
I held up 6 fingers in case anyone's curious about that.
She did her best, okay? Like we said, she's only been doing this for 1 year, so she's still learning math.
Med math
is hard.
Not it.
I'm joking. She's really good at it.
Anyway, I think that we have a pretty good perspective. I think that the bridge from AEMT or EMT to paramedic is a very stressful one. You go from being able to do a lot of cool things but not having a lot of liability to being able to do all the cool things but having all the liability, and suddenly it is much more stressful. And the question that we are posing today is, does it get better?
It never gets better. It does. It really does.
It does.
I know Jamie and I a couple of weeks ago were talking about how, like, we just wanted to be scared again. And that's kind of scary thing to say.
It really does. Like, the scared feeling, you forget that feeling after a little while because it does get less scary. There's still some things that could be scary.
Absolutely.
But it overall gets less scary, and you realize that was adrenaline. And that's a fun feeling to have.
Yeah. Well, and actually, like, when you first get out of school, the monotony is even scary. Like, just the tones dropping is scary. Mm-hmm. And that's what we mean. Like, I just want to be scared again. Like,
I want the tones to drop, and I want to run to the truck.
I want my belly to hurt.
And be like, oh my gosh, what am I about to go on? Yeah. Instead of, like, the tones drop, and I'm like, who fell?
Who fell down? Whose toe hurts?
Yeah, my tummy still hurts all the time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
When I first got my medic, because, you know, we have beautiful technology like Apple Watches, the first week that I had my medic, I went back and looked at my heart rate every day that I was on shift, and you could tell when the tones dropped because my heart rate would jump up to like 160. It was crazy.
I still look at that on some, like, really tough calls.
Yeah.
I'll be like, what was my heart rate during the middle of this chaos? And it is quite telling.
It is.
Still get nervous a lot of the time, but, I mean, I get it. I really didn't think it was going to get better. I was like, this is the worst thing ever. This is so terrible. How can anyone do this for the rest of their lives? It's so terrible. I mean, let me tell you, the first time I ever went on a call as a paramedic by myself without another paramedic, I was with Raveem. Shout out to Raveem. He is quite far away from us now, but actually he's not. He's just 1 county away. But it was literally the most low acuity ALS call. It was nausea, vomiting, and it was fine. I did everything right, and then I got to the hospital, dropped the patient off, and I cried. I was like, I messed up. It was terrible. And Christopher, he did not know I was upset. He was like, this is amazing. You did so well. It was your first call as a paramedic. This is so wonderful. And he took a picture of me, and that picture hangs on the wall of the station to this day. But I will never forget that call because I do so many scarier things now, and I did so many scarier things that day. But man, that was the moment when I was like, this is the worst job ever.
I had plenty of scared moments when I was still partners with Austin, but he was all of us. We were all partners with Austin at some point.
I was never scared if he was there.
No, he was like my safety net. And so I was comfortable with differentials. I was comfortable with skills. I just knew that if I messed it up, like Austin had my back. And
he wasn't going to let me mess it up.
And then I wasn't with them anymore. And I had to be very much in charge for a very long time, and I panicked a whole lot. Then year 2 of my medic license, you and I became partners, and that was like a game changer. But I still remember the feeling. We had a double code, and it's a call that we talked about in the last episode in the leadership that Aubrey, myself, and Austin were on. And I just remember looking at Austin, knowing that he was about to leave me, and I was going to be with this patient alone. And just gonna have to do it. And I was like, oh my. I really thought in that moment I was just gonna implode.
I don't know why that's so scary. It is, I can't describe the fear, but it's probably the scariest moments of my life have been that in the truck. I don't know. You know what to do. You absolutely know what to do.
And in any other moment when you're that terrified or that scared, or you're just like, your heart rate's 200 and you're like, here I go, you can escape. And every other moment where that happens, where you're like that fearful, you can be like, oh, I will try again tomorrow.
No.
But you can't in our job. You just have to keep doing it, which is great because like face your fears, but also terrifying because you can't run away from it.
You're in charge. I know that one of the scariest calls. So when I got out of medic school.
Oh, God.
It really hit the fan. I mean, hard. I mean, it was unforgiving. It was absolutely catastrophic, and nothing will ever hopefully compare to my first year out of medic school. I mean, it's like insane. Like if we sat down and talked about just Sophie's first year, like it was wild. When I became a medic, Austin was rudely snatched away from me, my partner, my paramedic partner.
He got promoted.
Yes, and he got promoted, and I was floated in, just float EMTs, brand new baby EMTs. I'm brand new baby medic, so I was extra terrified.
Yeah.
And I remember the very most terrifying call of my entire career to this day. To this day, it's the worst. It's the worst one. And I just remember him showing up and being like, oh, thank God Austin's here. And then we both realized that there was nothing either one of us could do. And then it was just like, I don't know, we just stared. I mean, that was also another realization of like, sometimes there's just no one can do anything. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's like, it's almost like less scary.
Yeah.
It's like some things just cannot be fixed.
I would say it's less scary, but it's more frustrating. Like when I get to a patient, that the only
it's
thing...
more sickening.
Right? The only thing that's going to help them is like a surgical intervention or something that we so clearly cannot do.
And we were very, very far away from any of those.
And you're like, well, here we go.
You better hope there is a helicopter available to fly. And there was not.
Ooh.
I think who Austin was for you is who Jamie is for me now. I'm double medic with Jamie. We were both medics on the same truck. So when I first got my medic, I purposefully picked up just a bunch of overtime with EMTs. And I still remember the first time that this person was sick. I did a 12 lead. I looked at the 12 lead and I immediately looked up to find another paramedic to be like, oh, what is going on? And there was not one. And that was horrific. But we made it, and it gets better. It does get better.
I think that's the best thing you can do for yourself.
Oh, yeah, to pick up a bunch?
Absolutely. If you are double medic, try and work with EMTs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I purposefully got a whole other full-time job in a county far, far away, in a land far, far away, which was very scary, and there was very scary people there, and it was very scary calls.
Yeah, like if you work if you work in a city, try to go work somewhere rural because it will teach you a whole new set of skills. And if you work somewhere rural, try to work somewhere more urban if that's like accessible where you are. But try to pick up a part-time job somewhere more urban, because you'll get a whole different kind of skill set, which would be cool. I was really happy that you picked up a lot of overtime when you first
really
got your
did.
medic.
I was like, is Aubrey okay?
I had such a safety net when I was with Austin that it took us not being able to be partners anymore after the bid for me to like venture out, because I just would have stayed partners with that man. And that was so good for me as a medic.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that you picked up as much overtime as you did, because you learned like your own like isms and your own skill set, the way that you like to do things.
Well, I think we've all been able to learn from each other of like how to become the best version of ourselves, the best medics.
Absolutely.
And even Austin like let you and me, I feel like.
Oh, do you know what call I remember where Austin and I both looked at each other and we were like, Soph's got it. Like, she's here. It was when you got your medic and you and Austin...
I can't wait.
You and Austin had a chest pain. You did a 12 lead. And it was like a giant left bundle.
Oh, I
But
remember
he
this.
had no clue if it was normal for him or not. He was symptomatic. He looked terrible. And you were like, Austin, do you think we should call it? I think we should call it. And Austin was like, no, Soph, I wouldn't call that. And you're like, well, I would.
And I was like, my tummy is upset.
And you did. And you went to, the docs did not call it off. He went to the cath lab and you were correct. And that was such a cool moment for me, because it didn't waver you that he disagreed.
Because he let me feel safe enough to disagree with him.
Which was so cool.
And that's a
hard
true
to do.
mentor.
Yeah. It is a hard thing to do. That's like my favorite story. I remember he came back and he was like, listen to what Soph did. It's so cool. And I was like, oh, our little Soph.
It was, and truthfully, as safe as Austin has made me feel to disagree with him, I was still nervous to disagree with him because I still a little bit idolize the man.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
Obviously, like, he has taught me everything I know. But I think that's a good like side point to make. Like, when you are precepting and FTOing new hires, let them feel safe enough to disagree with you. And obviously, if they are going off into left field, okay, let's rein them in. But like, people need to feel safe to disagree.
Absolutely.
Because patients' lives do depend on it.
I have a really hard time doing that because I'm very particular. And so I like things the way that I like things, which Obbs has experienced firsthand. So I have a hard time letting go enough to be like, let's hear what you think, which I've actively worked on. But Obbs getting her medic helped so much because there were patients that weren't my patients.
Well, I think that also...
And she would be like, I want to do it this way. And I'd be like, okay. And now it's so much easier to do. But it's made me well aware that like you have to be safe for someone to disagree with you. Because Austin, even when I was an EMT, he treated it like such a partnership.
Absolutely. I love that. And that's why you got to be a big girl medic.
Absolutely. He would be like, Jane, what do you think? And I loved that. And so I made an attempt to do that. But my partner at the time was a fantastic EMT, but was not interested in thinking above that scope at that time. But it made me good at vocalizing, but it also made me kind of rigid. And so coming away from that, when I came back into what felt like I knew a partnership to be, I had to like kind of back off a little bit. And I think over the years I've softened.
You have.
How do you guys feel about services that standardize and mandate paramedics working with another paramedic or riding thirds for 6 months or greater?
I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think it is very interesting when you look at nursing, like new grad nurses compared to new grad paramedics. I know this is true for a lot of the services around here. You do a couple of FTO rides straight out of school. You get signed off. You are good. You are now the captain of this ship. You are in charge of this truck. And you might get put with a brand new EMT and you're a brand new medic. It's a very, very short training period. Now, if we look at nursing, it's like 6 months on the floor. You have a nurse that is with you all the time. Their training period looks so much different from ours, and they are in a much more controlled setting than we are.
Right.
I think that there are so many variables in EMS, like situational. Like, there are just so many weird things that we have to deal with that have nothing to do with medicine. And I think that that can get you in some sticky situations if you have not been doing this for a long time.
Right.
For sure.
Agree. And the stakes might be a little higher as far as like personal safety.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And as far as resources, you have to really be a jack of all trades. You have to be a bit of a MacGyver. You have to be able to figure out how to manage a situation when you don't have something, or when you've ran out of something, or when you've used all of something on that call. You kind of have to find a workaround. And that's all stuff that comes with training and support and your FTO program, and being able to like be taught thoroughly. Because I might not have the experience if I'm new, but if I have a FTO with me that's going to be with me for 6 months or however long, they have the experience. So ideally, they can identify a situation for me and be like, hey, just so you know, this isn't safe and this is why. Because I might not have seen it, because I might just be like a little brand new baby deer. I don't know headlights are supposed to be bad. So like they can teach you things. And I think the logistics of doing a 6 months long new hire orientation is really difficult, because we're a really short-staffed field.
Right, it's a privilege.
Right, and so when you say, like, you're going to ride with this other medic, either they're your new partner, then people get split up from partners, and they don't love that, or you're going to ride thirds. Budget-wise, that's not great. If you're a county service or you're taxpayer-funded, like, that's tough. And do we even have the manpower? Like, are we down a truck right now? Because we've all had the pressure as FTOs to push somebody out. Like, hey, I have a spot to fill. I need you to get them out. And that's really tough. I love the idea. I just don't know if we could logistically hammer that out.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't love the idea of 6 months. I think that's a crutch. I think I'm biased because we have a very high QD, high paced system. And maybe if you went to maybe one of our neighboring counties that might actually operate this way and run less calls, like, I get it because you are running less calls. But for us, I think maybe 2 months. And I really love the idea of putting you with an EMT and having an FTO with you.
Oh, so like you are with your partner.
You're with
and
a partner.
Ride with you.
And a FTO rides with you.
I like that idea.
And maybe that's your incentive as an FTO. We can't always pay FTOs to be FTOs. But maybe for 4 hours or 6 hours a week, your FTO comes in and they ride with you. It doesn't even have to be like a 24-hour shift.
Yeah.
And they observe.
I like that. That would give you time to ask questions, time to be like, hey, after you left last shift, I got this call. And as long as that person's willing to be a resource kind of around the clock for you, I think that would be absolutely reasonable. I like that as a new hire, you wouldn't be riding thirds with your FTO and their partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we all know that is like really hard.
Well, that's like taking a bear out of
manage.
their natural habitat. Like,
Yeah.
what?
And like when people ride with us, like when I'm a FTO at our service, and when I have a new hire, Aubrey and I can run a call without even having to talk. And so we can like look across the room, and I'm like, okay, so we're going to get the stair chair, the dreaded stair chair. Because she'll look at me like, oh man, but we gotta. And I'm like, ugh, stair chair. But like, she can just give me a look. I already know what we're doing.
Yeah.
So if I have a new hire, they miss that. And then they're like, okay, but did I miss making that decision? Did I make a mistake? And I'm like, oh no, this is just how my partner and I communicate. And Austin and I used to be able to do that too. And so that's tough. But if you ride with them with their partner, then they're in their natural habitat and you're observing. And I like that dynamic a lot better, because it's less like, where do I fit in?
Yeah.
And more like, this is my house and you're coming to be with me.
Well, and you're more likely to act natural and make the mistake that you're going to make in real life if you're with your partner doing the things you would do every single day. And why don't we catch those mistakes naturally with your FTO there, right?
Yeah.
Instead of after the fact when it's gone way wrong. Right?
Absolutely. When we're a year in and we start doing QAs.
And we're like, what? Every single one of your chest pains. What the heck happened here?
He said, did we forget about protocols?
And
Oh, that sounded like a good ditty.
And then when we ask, did it get easier? No, it didn't get easier because I didn't find out I was messing up until 2 years later.
Absolutely. Feedback is very important.
A QA system, very important.
Very important.
I think that giving any employee feedback, EMT level, paramedic level, I don't even care, administrative level, we need to be talking to our peers. We need to be talking to our administrators. We need to be talking to our supervisors. It is so important to hear how functional we are or are not, because we are never going to get better. Our patients are going to keep dying if that is what's happening. Like, what is wrong with you that we're not doing this?
There is a service director in Alaska that moved there from a different part of the country and took over the service, and she did a talk called Bad Apples, and it was basically about like when people are not on board with what you're doing, how do you handle it? And it was fantastic. She's very charismatic. She's the editor for Gems. This woman is just a powerhouse of a human.
Powerhouse.
In that talk, she kind of outlines like she did performance reviews. I think they were quarterly.
I want someone to performance review me.
Yes.
Brian, performance review me. Brian's our director.
Yeah.
You're wondering.
It's a very sweet man. But I loved that they did quarterly performance reviews. And she was like, it was a lot of work. My supervisors were not thrilled about it. But everybody performance reviewed everyone under them.
Turns out anything that's worth it is a lot of work.
And people loved it because you would either get like, hey, I really love your attitude towards your patients. You always seem to be happy and positive and all those things. But I did notice the other day that you're having a really hard time pulling the trigger on whether you're going to make the call ALS or BLS. Or you have a really hard time pulling the trigger on medication intervention. So, like, let's work on that. Let's work on your confidence in that area. That would be fantastic. Yeah. Because I'm sure they have it. Like, we ask Austin and Wendy all the time, like, hey, how'd I do? What would you have done differently?
And even if somebody notices that, like, I'm struggling, that means they noticed me. They noticed. That means they give it. Mm-hmm. That's something. I mean, the truth of the matter is, generally, I think most people feel this way in EMS, and I can say this coming from someone who did work full-time in a really teeny tiny county where it just didn't really feel like anyone cared about you. When someone notices, it does matter.
It really does.
It makes 100% difference in morale. Even if they're noticing that something's wrong.
Yeah.
It really makes a difference when they notice something going right. But I think performance reviews make all the difference. And when you talk about new medics, wrapping it back around to does it get any better, if we start the intervention early from the beginning, I mean, it sets the tone. Like, why are we doing this? It's like sending someone to prison and them not knowing why they went to prison. Like,
right.
What did I do wrong? I don't know. You killed everybody.
And do you know how disheartening it is to think you're doing a decent job?
And not.
And then you're not.
And
or
then
you
find out everyone was talking mad crap about you in the hospital.
Or you look at your patient outcomes and everyone, it says expired on everybody. And you're like, I thought I did everything right. Were all my patients dying? It may be that you've just kind of gotten a bad draw. And
unlucky.
You did the correct things. But it also may be that your interventions are inappropriate.
Or you're not intervening.
Told you. Yeah. Sometimes doing nothing is bad. Sometimes doing everything is bad. But it's so disheartening when you have been doing the same thing the same way for like a year. And then someone says, that's actually horrible. Welcome to EMS. Our general everything is like, hey, so we did it this way for a really long time. Turns out we killed everybody by doing that. Atropine's 1 milligram now, and Epi is questionable, but we're still going to use it. You know, that's what happens in EMS. So
Epi straight to the heart.
Right. We should fix it in the ways that we can fix it.
So to answer your question, it does get better. It is really scary, and then it gets less scary, and then it weirdly gets scary again, and then it gets better.
But it gets scary about different things, and we'll talk about that later. By later, I mean in like 25 episodes down the road. Because you're not ready for that.
Not ready.
Nobody's ready for that.
But it does. It gets scary for different reasons. But it's kind of a good thing. Does it get better? Yes. It absolutely gets better.
It gets so much better. And you start having so much fun.
For sure. And you get more comfortable and you trust yourself more and all of that's beautiful. But also, like, it stays scary. And it should. If you're doing EMS right, you should be a bit fearful every time you go to intervene with a patient. Because one, it keeps you honest, it keeps you humble, and it keeps you healthy. Because you have to keep looking at new data and new medicine and things that come out and stay current. And everything new should give you a little bit of apprehension. But if you keep learning, you're going to stay scared. And I mean that in the healthiest way.
I love what Chris Smith always says. when he says getting your paramedic license is just a license to learn. And I've always loved that.
It's a very
because
Chris
it is
thing
so
to
true.
say.
Like, the things that you learn in paramedic school are the basics, and that's the
They
truth.
are the basics.
Absolutely.
And I think that might be why it's so scary, because you know that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You come out of school and you start interacting with patients, and you quickly realize that you have a lot of knowledge in your head, but it is not enough.
Absolutely. I find that every time that we sit in the bay. It's my favorite thing that we do. We all sit in the bay and we just start to talk about something. And Austin and Soph are just like connoisseurs of outlandish information. And so they will be like, hey, this disorder, let's chat about it. And
You
I'm
should have
over
seen
here.
us on the truck. We were so weird when we were partners.
I'm over here on Google.
Just the most Googling I've ever seen in my
Yeah.
life.
Oh, it was so weird. It was before ChatGPT was a thing.
I'm like,
too.
yeah, we can chat about that, but I got to Google it first so I know what those words mean. But it has made me
Please hold.
such a better like student, a better medic, everything. But I just get more scared every time we talk about new things because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to put that on my differential list.
But there's like a sliding scale, okay? There's the tones drop and I'm gonna vomit, and then there is I don't even care about my patient. So I think once you become a grown-up medic, appropriate grown-up medic, you become, I'm a little nervous because you look sick,
Mm-hmm.
but I have all the tools and I know who to call when
For
I don't know
sure.
what to do.
For sure.
That's where you need to live for the most part.
I think an interesting phenomenon, and from the people that I've talked to about this, I think it's a normal thing. From what I've been told, maybe they were just trying to make me feel better. But when I first graduated medic school, I felt like I had a lot of knowledge. Like, I was very book smart, and I could rattle off all sorts of information. And with that came a lot of confidence. And then I had a lot of patient contacts, interacted with patients a lot, built up more confidence, and then all of a sudden, probably about like 7-8 months in, there was like this lull where you start to forget all the things from medic school that you don't use every day, and your confidence goes away.
It does start to, deteriorate, and that should be a reminder that like you have to keep hitting the books, you have to keep up with research and medicine, and you have to surround yourself with people and maybe a service that cares about continuing education and cares about modern medicine and appropriate medicine and cares about what is right for the patient. And I think that we have that.
I think so too.
So what we're saying is find yourself some nerdy friends.
Find yourself some nerdy friends.
Really.
Some weirdo EMS friends.
You do. You got to find your tribe, especially in EMS, because it just gets really lonely. And I find this is true for men a lot more than it is true for women. But a lot of times men are married to somebody outside of the field. And whether it's now, if you're married to like an ER nurse, I think good, because they see a lot of the same things that we do, and they understand like the acuity and the change and all of that. But I feel like a lot of men are married to people very much outside this field. And it becomes hard to talk about, hard to get things off your chest, because you don't want to like traumatize them if you've seen something traumatic, but you still need to talk about it. So find your people. They will help you with continuing ed. They will help you with your confidence. They will also help you with your mental health. Like, you need that group that does the same job as you.
Speaking of some good old advice, what kind of advice could we give to those new medics when it feels impossible to keep going? Because when I tell ya, it felt impossible to keep going for a minute there. And I felt like my mental health was in a pretty good place when I got out of medic school. Probably the best it's been. But man, I just felt like this is too hard. It's too hard to do a perfect job every time, because that's the kind of person I am. I think that's a lot of who we are in EMS as paramedics. A lot of us are type A or some variation of type A. We want to do the best we can every single time, almost perfect. And it's not possible because there's not a playbook. I know there's protocols, but not every patient is cookie cutter. In fact, no patient is cookie cutter. So what are some things that kind of got you through it? What helped you get over that impossible mountain? Because we all remember the time that I was I was, one time, it was my last month of paramedic school, and Aubrey and Jamie got back from a call, and I was weirdly sanding a table in the bay, and this was the first time I think they had ever seen me cry.
Sanding and crying.
And I was just crying because I just didn't think I was going to be good enough. And for months after that, I continued to feel not good enough because I just didn't think I was providing the care that was perfect enough.
How did you get through that?
I just had to get comfy with knowing that this is, I don't know if this is appropriate to say, that our protocols aren't perfect. I can only provide the care that the doctor allows me to provide. I can only provide the care that the state provides to me to provide. I can only really provide the care that the patient states is what's going on. So really, I don't have a lot to work with. I had to remind myself that. I do not have a lot to work with.
I get really hard on myself still. And that's a huge thing that Obbs and I will have to talk about, because I'll come in the truck and be like, that call was terrible.
Yeah.
And she'll be like, what do you mean? And I'm like, it was awful. And she's like, Jane, we have nothing. They told you X, Y, and Z. You went down the pathway of X, Y, and Z. And then at the very end, they said, oh, but actually F. And then you're scrambling trying to figure out this new system that they've mentioned, and you don't have any insight at all. And you've also only got like 30 minutes to figure it out. And I get really frustrated when we go into the ER and I look dumb, which is why being a new medic was hard for me, because I don't like to be bad at things. And so I'll get really frustrated when the patient changes their story, or maybe I just went down the wrong rabbit hole.
And
but
that happens.
I feel like I go in the ER and now I look dumb. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I will never recover from this.
That was one of the hardest
and
things,
then I do.
too.
I will
You're going to
never.
look dumb sometimes.
And it's okay. And sometimes you follow a hunch or a gut feeling, and you go in there and you're advocating for that hunch or that gut feeling just because, like, you know. And sometimes you're wrong.
And sometimes you're right,
And
and you still
sometimes-
look dumb because other people... You're going to look dumb sometimes, but you got to still advocate for your patient, because sometimes you're going to be right.
Yeah.
And if you keep up with your medicine and you keep studying, because you're never going to stop studying if you want to be good at this job. If you want to be worth a crap in this job, in this field, you're going to have to keep studying. You have to keep advocating for your patient. And you're going to look dumb sometimes in front of doctors, because just because you went to doctor school does not mean you know everything. Have you ever been to a doctor, like yourself, and been like, what?
What in the world?
Same thing happens in the ER.
Absolutely.
Just because, have you ever met a paramedic that's not good at their job? Have you ever met anybody
That's
who
not
has
good
a
at their job.
license in anything? Have you ever met someone who drives a car and has a driver's license and is bad at it?
Subpar.
Exactly. Okay? Just because you have a license in something doesn't mean you're good at it. So just keep studying.
Fun. Just follow your gut. It is okay to be wrong. But the one thing that you can't do is over justify and try to pretend that you're right.
Treat your patient.
Just accept it. If you're wrong, you're wrong. It's totally fine. Just say, this is why I went down this. As long as you have logical thought, that is okay. I think where people really get in trouble is when they try to defend their theory to the grave. And I've been...
You look
I've
dumb, and you are
yes.
dumb at that point.
I've been very guilty of doing that sometimes, where I really just double down because of my fear of looking dumb. I will double down, and it makes it worse. And I don't do that any longer. But initially finding that, like, humble admittance that I was incorrect was really
egos do
hard
not
for me to
save
do.
lives.
And so I think that that's something in paramedicine, like, do not die on that hill. If you're wrong and someone is, like, proven to you that you are, and that's okay. Just be like, all right, we have more data now, so that's okay. I think a new medic, that is a big thing to take with you, is like, be humble, ask questions, admit, and be okay with admitting that you were wrong. And that's
And
okay.
I do think there's two types of new medics. There's the new medic that thinks they're worthless, and I think there's the new medic that has the biggest ego you've ever seen in your life.
Which one's going to be better? It's always the one that thinks that they're not doing it good enough. They're like, man, I guess I'm an okay medic, but I'm not that great. That's going to be the medic that you're like, they got it. And the
wish
medic
they
that
were a
walks in the
little
room
happier.
and they're like, EMS has arrived, and starts screaming throughout the house. Those are the ones that are going to do not so great. Because if you can't use your resources, you can't ask for help, you can't ask questions, you can't admit that somebody might know something more than you, you're screwed.
Oh, yeah.
And so is everybody around you.
Well, and those kind of medics, too, like, they don't even trust the patient. They're just like, ugh, what are you even talking about? Like, they didn't even believe the patient's symptoms. I'm like, you need to cool it over there.
Right. Oh, you have chest pain? You look fine.
My piece of advice, when I first got out of or even before I got out of medic school, I made myself like a literal binder with a bunch of references and like random stuff that I knew I would not remember, or stuff that I knew I would want to be able to quick reference on a call. And it's kind of like my comfort item. I carry it with me on every single call. Every single morning I put it in the truck, and that is my comfort, and I've used it more times than I can count.
It really is amazing. I love it too. Remember that one time
We found Welland syndrome.
and that was amazing. But wrapping things up, what could we tell seasoned medics to remember about new medics or modern new medics? Because it is a lot different now.
It is.
It's different. It's not the same, and there's a whole lot more at stake.
I would say remember the things that you didn't know. Remember how long it took you to feel comfortable managing a scene. Remember how long it took you to feel comfortable pulling the trigger on certain interventions. And do not for a second make those new medics feel like they are not doing it well enough or fast enough, or they're not proficient enough. Because if you're not being a resource for them, then you're part of the problem. And so make new medics comfortable to come talk to you. Make them comfortable to kind of voice their opinion. And if you are like an older seasoned medic, ask them questions, because I learned the most from people coming out of paramedic school than I do from like my ass just sitting here 6 years out. And I'm not even an old lady yet, allegedly.
Allegedly.
But I learned so much from our seasoned medics that have been doing this for 35, 40 years.
And fun stuff. I'm like, whoa.
Right? I'm like, y'all did what?
Yeah.
But I learned so much from them, both like life lessons and also like things about medicine. Because sometimes, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, there are certain things in medicine that like the old school way really is the best way.
Yeah.
And then the people that are the most valuable in my life also learn things from us.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice. Just like keep an open mind, be a resource, and do not make them feel bad for not having 30 years under their belt yet. Because if you do that,
yes.
maybe we won't have any more 30-year medics.
Everyone
because they
was
won't
new.
stay.
Everyone was new
Yeah.
once.
We were all EMTs. We were all brand new. We were all baby medics. Like, just be kind with them.
And I think that's my biggest thing is remember how unkind they were to you when you were new.
Right? You know,
And
remember
don't ever.
how people will be like, well, they just threw us to the wolves out there. You didn't even get no chances. They threw you to the wolves. They said sink or drown or swim or something. And we were like, oh my gosh, they did what?
They just tied bricks to my feet and said, suck it up.
Right? And they're like,
Susie."
so I'm throwing you a noodle, so you better be grateful for this noodle. I'm like, guys, that was bad.
That's really
That's not
dangerous,
good.
actually.
That's trauma talking.
They shouldn't have done that to you, guys.
Yeah, honey,
and they're
are you
like,
okay?
well, I'm bitter for it. I said, maybe in some ways, but in other
I
ways,
don't know about that.
not so much. So let's not keep doing that. Let's not keep the generational EMS trauma going.
Oof.
Yes.
You know, we don't need to be like coddle, love, you can't do anything wrong. But
No,
we do need
that's
to
also dangerous.
not tie
Correct.
cinder blocks to people's feet and throw them in the river. I feel like we can find a middle somewhere, middle
Absolutely.
ground.
I think a great example of everything that you just said is Betsy. Betsy is a medic that has been
Betsy.
at our service for over 20 years. And any time that like a new medic or just a relatively younger medic works with her, she will get so excited and she will say, teach me things, because it has been 20 plus years since I've been to medic school. Teach me what you know. And she is a blast to work with. She is so fun. She has the greatest attitude. If I even have a fourth of the attitude that Betsy has when I am 20 years in, my EMS career will be a success. But she is so willing to learn, and she is so welcoming and wonderful. And I think we all can take a page out of that book.
For
Tears
sure.
are literally welling up in my eyes, and my nose is getting like tingly right now thinking about this. But one of my other worst calls ever was also in my first year of being a medic, and Betsy and Tara were at the hospital when I got there. One of those calls where I really had never been that scared before. Oh my gosh, I just don't even, it was so scary. I was so proud, but I was also so scared, and it turned out really well. But the smile on Betsy's face, and she said, girl, I am so proud of you. I'll never forget that ever my whole life. And that is all I've ever needed in my whole life, and that's healed all my childhood trauma in one moment. But like grown-up medics, that changed everything for me, and that's all I ever needed.
Absolutely. If you have over 25 years under your belt, it is the smallest thing for you, like minimal effort, to just find a new medic and be like, hey, I've seen you bring some people in. I think you're doing a really good job. Keep it up.
It means something. I have so much respect for her, and that she said that to me meant it meant everything. It still means everything to me.
It will change your world. I had only been a medic for like a year or two, I think. I had a call and I requested a supervisor because things were going very south. And I ended up intubating and transferring to the hospital. She met us there and I was like freaking out. Not like outwardly, but inwardly. We get everything squared away and I was like, I'm so sorry we didn't wait for you. I just feel like we didn't have time. And she just looked at me and she said, James, I wasn't worried. You got it. And just walked away. And those words were so not like this like deep sentimental moment. But when she said like, James, I wasn't worried, you got it. I was just like, oh my God. To me, she is like that medic that has so much confidence in everything she does and has so much proficiency that when like she wasn't worried about me, that was the moment where I was like, I think I can probably do this, which is cool. That's what it gave me. So if you are a medic that is seasoned and you have some years under your belt, give that to younger medics.
It matters.
Give them like the head nod or the handshake or the seal of approval, because it will give them what they need to have the confidence to keep doing this job.
Absolutely.
All right, and with that, share your courage, share your kindness, and we will see you next week.
This has been Life in Sirens, produced by 3 nerds trying to bring you content that you might actually care about.